The logo of the National Federation of the Blind of Tennessee appears, with the tagline, Live the Life You Want.
It is time to get started. So the 2020 convention of the National Federation of the Blind of Tennessee is back in session. We're going to get started on time. People are still jumping on here, but we will go ahead and get started. We're going to start by finding out who's not here because Melissa's going to give a door prize, and it's going to be a from the Memphis chapter, $50 in cash. So somebody's gonna be upset that they weren't here to get this one. But Melissa, who do we have?
The first one is Betty Tucker.
Betty, I did not see her up here. Betty, are you here?
Nope.
Betty's gonna lose out on $50.
Okay, give it somebody else.
Okay, next winner will be Natalie Norwood.
Oh, I'm here.
Natalie.
All right.
I'm here.
How's the beach, Natalie? Natalie's sitting, for those of you who know, she's down at the beach right now, so she's got the best place to go to a convention.
Are you out?
The beach is rainy today.
Oh.
That helps to be on a Zoom.
So Kim's there with her, huh?
Yes.
All right. So congratulations on your door prize. So we will move on. Do you want to get the $250 prize now? Nah.
Yeah, to me.
No, let's
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with our first presentation. You know, every year we do a session. We call it, why I am a Federationist. And, I think it's an important session to do. And this session has been in the making for a year and a half because James Brown was supposed to present at the 2019 convention, and the scheduling got behind, and he volunteered to forego his presentation that year. Then we were supposed to do it in April at our Clarksville convention, and he obviously didn't do it then. So now, finally, James Brown is going to present. James, everybody knows James. He is a former president of this affiliate, remains an active board member, heads up our legislation, and just a great Federationist. And with that, James Brown, tell us, why are you a Federationist?
Well, Terry, there's quite a few reasons why I'm a Federationist, and I just wanted to start out with a quote from probably my most favorite philosopher all time. That would be Winnie the Pooh. And Winnie the Pooh once said that people say nothing is impossible, but I do nothing all the time. And some of you will probably get that joke tomorrow, but it does have to do with the figure that hibernates. It's kind of funny. I woke up a couple of days ago and I had a speech prepared that I had just written fresh for you all. And I got up really early in the morning and I decided, I'm going to clean out my computer. My files it's all kind of messy in there. For those of you who don't use a computer a lot, it gets kind of messy, like your room. You have to clean it up. And so I was very sleepy, hadn't had breakfast, was up early, and dumped a bunch of stuff into my recycling bin and immediately flushed it right down the toilet, the cyber toilet there, and it was gone. So I came back to look at my presentation later that day just to kind of go over it, make sure everything was okay, and figured out that in my sleep-deprived state, I had accidentally deleted it. So we're going to do a different presentation today, and I actually thought I had a few canned presentations that I had done before, not here in the state of Tennessee. And I could have done those, but they would have been a little bit longer than Terry probably would have liked. And I know what it's like to be put in a position where you go over. And, so I didn't want to do that to Terry. But why we should be Federationist. And the reason why I say that is because most of the time when people tell you why they are a federation. It really is asking you or telling you why you should be a federationist. So, you know, a couple of years ago, I was leading a chapter meeting. Our Nashville chapter president, Mr. Jimmy Bain, was out of town. So, like a good vice president, I was the backup quarterback that day, and I was trying to lead the team to victory. And I get there early in the morning, and the presenter that we were having that day didn't show up. And that pretty much meant that I had a 30-minute time spot that I had to fill in. And, you know, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to do something. And something that we do at our chapter meetings right at the beginning is we say the pledge to the National Federation of the Blind. And while we're doing the pledge, I said, well, you know, I think we can kind of fill in this time by going over the pledge and seeing what it really means. And so I thought it would be appropriate, as I had deleted my presentation, if I tell you why I'm a federation using the pledge of the National Federation of the Blind. And, you know, it's really interesting too. The Federation prepares you for things. Kevin Worley said this last night, that when you're part of the Federation and you're being thrown into leadership situations or you're being thrown into service situations, that sometimes things come up and they cause us to think on our feet and become better at what we do. And so that's one of the reasons why I am a federationist. But while we do this, I want you to think about why I should be a federationist as well. So, if you don't know it, repeat after me. I pledge to actively participate.
I pledge to actively participate
In the efforts of the National Federation of the Blind.
in the efforts of the National Federation of the Blind.
To achieve equality, opportunity, and security for the blind. To achieve equality, opportunity, and security for the blind. That's a bigger one, I know. To support the policies and programs of the Federation and to abide by its Constitution. So that is the pledge. And so the very first question I asked that morning was, what is a pledge? And we found out very quickly that simply enough, a pledge is basically a promise. So it's a promise to do something. Now, the first part is I pledge to actively participate. And that's one of the big reasons why I'm a federationist. You know, if you've noticed on Facebook or if you've been on any kind of social media, you will notice that there have been thousands of sort of white cane events all around the country. Now, it's been a little bit curtailed by COVID, you know, because we can't be out as much as we usually are. But you'll find out that there's just thousands of events. So you've got all these people all over the country working very hard, actively participating in the effort of the National Federation of the Blind. You know, our Nashville chapter, we do what we call the Braille's Hot Chili Cook-Off every year. We have just all kinds of people come in from different organizations that we're familiar with and, you know, sponsor a chili and have a chili cook-off. And it's a good event where we have an auction, we get sponsors, but we also talk about blindness to all the people who participate. I want to be part of a winning team. You know, I'm going to the Titans game tomorrow where the undefeated Tennessee Titans are going to be taking on the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers. And there's nothing more exciting than being part of a winning team. And so, you know, actively participating, being part of a winning team, that's what it's all about. You know, I sat down and we talked about actively participating in the efforts of the National Federation of the Blind. My first convention, I sat down at the bar. It was 2007, and I had to get dinner. I was a national scholarship winner. I was on a really tight schedule, but I sat down at the bar and immediately noticed, like, I think it was to my right, there was a blind lawyer. To my left, there was, I think it was a blind television producer. And to his left, there was a blind scientist who worked on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico. And, being this was my first experience at national conventions, seeing what it's like to be around 2,000 blind people and all the confidence and the success and efficacy that's there. I was just amazed. And as I sat and I talked to these three people over dinner, I thought to myself, this is a place I want to be around. And I was just so impressed. And so why I'm a federationist, one of the first reasons is I want to be a part of a winning team. And the National Federation of the Blind is a winning team. Now, the next part of it is I pledge to actively participate in the efforts of the National Federation of the Blind. Now, what is the National Federation of the Blind? The National Federation of the Blind is over 50,000 members strong. And again, that's another aspect to say this is a winning team. Dr. Jernigan said a long time ago that being part of a group of people is powerful. So he said even the animals know that it's good to be around in packs. And so we got somebody in the background. That's great. But it's great to be a part of a group and you're more powerful. I remember I was affiliate president, back a few years ago, and I was affiliate president for 6 years. And 2 years into my presidency, I got an email. And this email was from Senator Alexander's office. And it was a pretty strange email, actually. And it was just kind of basically saying, James, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. We were just wondering, how many members does your affiliate have? And, at that time, I think we had about 200 members of the affiliate. And, I wrote back, but I instantly knew that the reason I was being asked this question is because people inside Senator Alexander's office were asking me, how much power does your group have? How much should we really listen to you? And so I think being a part of a group that has so many members, that has a lot of quote power, which, in a lot of ways is what we're looking for, because power allows you to be able to get things done. And that's part of what we're doing. But I want to go a little bit deeper and talk about who are the blind, because we're not only the National Federation of the Blind, but we're also the blind. And probably the most controversial question we could ask is, who is blind? Dr. Jernigan, he asked this question to a group of students one time. And in a typical way, these students said, well, being blind is if you can't see anything, if you see darkness. And, they basically all said a little bit different things, but the conclusion was, who's blind? Well, that's people who can't see anything. But we know that that's not true. And Dr. Jernigan went on to talk about his definition of blindness, and that is a functional definition of blindness. And that functional definition basically states that if you need enough adaptations, if you need enough technologies to adapt to your condition, which is vision loss, then you are blind. And so, for example, somebody who does a really great job with this would be, I'll just use Josh Harper as an example. Josh actually, is able to drive with a monocular, and he's been doing that for the past year. But Josh also uses a cane, and Josh does that because there are certain times when he needs a cane to be effective. I don't think he uses one all the time, but he does. And Josh uses a lot of other adaptations to make sure that he can gain information. And that's the point. I know for me, I had a point in my life where I, quote, chose to be blind because I had a lot of usable vision when I was younger. I went to the Tennessee School for the Blind for a short period in high school. And, being that I had usable vision, I was a little bit afraid of using the cane because somewhere deep down in my psyche, I knew that if I used the cane, it might mean that I was blind. And that proposition was a little bit scary. Now, when I was in my early 20s and I went to go to college, I had to make a choice, right? Because I was going to be around a lot of unfamiliar situations, a lot of people I didn't know, a lot of geography I didn't know. And so I had to choose, am I going to use a cane or am I going to look like some drunk fraternity student, who just, fraternity break, drinking too early in the morning, because sure, 9 out of 10 times I would be fine, but that 10th time, I would probably do something stupid like run into somebody, um, you know, talk to somebody that wasn't there, do all kinds of interesting things. We know this, right? Because most of us have been there. So I had to make a choice right before I started school. And the interesting thing is once I started college and I started using my cane, I figured out that that thing I had been so scared of, that thing that represented me going blind, which was the big scary word, was the one thing that had given me more freedom than I'd had pretty much my whole life. Because now I was able to be who I was, to be a person um, that would need a cane, to be a person that could walk anywhere I wanted to go and not fear running into something, not fear what people were thinking about me. Not, do they think he's crazy? They would just think, oh, he's a blind guy. And of course, there are some negative connotations that can come along with that when people look at you. But the fact is that I was, for the first time in my life, I was being who I really was. I was I was taking a hold of those things that I really needed. So I'm going to explain this thing with kind of a couple examples of what it really means to be blind and how you get there emotionally. So the first thing is called emotional acceptance, and that's one of the things that the National Federation of the Blind teaches us about being blind. That first, we have to emotionally accept what's going on with our blindness. So emotional acceptance, I'll give one example. It's kind of like a person who gets diabetes and they go to the doctor and the doctor said, "Sir, I'm sorry you've got diabetes, but it's kind of getting bad and you need to make some life changes. You're going to have to get on some medicine in order to fix this diabetes problem and get your blood sugar levels down to the point to where they should be. But there's one problem, right? Let's just say that this was John Smith, not Terry's brother, but we'll just call him John Smith. And John Smith's father died of diabetes when John was a little kid. And so there is this huge emotional barrier to John accepting that he has diabetes, because even thinking about diabetes causes him to sort of go off track. So he can't even think about it because it hurts. In some cases, maybe a little bit physically hurts. And so John doesn't go on any of his medicine. He kind of ignores all the doctor's orders, and he goes back 6 months later, and the doctor says, you know, John, your numbers are still up. What's going on? And you're not taking your medicine. And John says, no, I haven't taken my medicine. And it comes out that maybe John tells him that he does have fears about diabetes. He's been trying to avoid that he actually has diabetes. And so emotional acceptance is all about getting over that initial barrier that, hey, I am blind, and now I can figure out the ways to make this thing that I thought was so terrible just merely an inconvenience. And I can get over all these barriers that I thought and have a great life, even with blindness, right? And there's also another example I kind of wanted to talk about, and that is
2-minute warning, James.
You know what?
2-minute warning.
Oh my gosh. So I thought I was going to go really fast, and I'm not. I am going to go really fast, and I might take a couple extra minutes, just a couple. So Kim and Kim's at the beach right now. I've been to her condo up there in Gulf Shores, and if you're on the beach, the last time I went to her condo and rented it out, there was a really big current, right? And there was an undertow, and you had to be careful because the flags were pretty ominous. And what a lot of people don't know about a big undertow is that if you get pulled out by an undertow, don't try to fight against it, because if you do, you'll get really tired and you'll end up drowning. All you have to do is let the undertow take you out. It'll let you go, and then you can swim right back around and you'll be perfectly safe. So what I want to tell you is, don't let the undertow make you so tired that you drown and your life is not successful. So just let it take you away. Let blindness take you away, and swim back around to the shore and do what you got to do. Now, the last part, or towards the final part, is I pledge to actively participate in the efforts of the National Federation of Blind to achieve equality, secure opportunity, and security. Now, I find it really interesting that Dr. Jernigan, when he made the pledge, switched the order here. He put equality first when it had typically been from the beginning, security, equality, and opportunity. Now, that's probably because Dr. Tinbrook fixed that security issue for the most part, because we got Social Security incorporated to, include people with disabilities. And so that made sure that people weren't starving who were blind. That was a big problem back in 1940 when we got all this stuff. So Dr. Jernigan put equality first. And equality for me is really big. So example of equality is, us teaching Braille, us making sure that teaching Braille is important. When I say teaching Braille is important, I didn't get taught Braille. Even though I asked at the Tennessee School for the Blind, they told me I had too much sight. I would use my vision. If it were up to the NFB, I would have been taught Braille when I was in early high school. And so we need to have equality. We need to have opportunity. If it weren't for the National Federation of the Blind, I wouldn't have got my job with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, because I wouldn't have been allowed to get on the state registry. And the National Federation of the Blind made that possible. So we've created so many opportunities, so much equality. We've got a long way to go, but we're getting there. All right, I'm going to skip some things. Support the policies and programs of the Federation. So how can we do this? When we support the policies of the Federation, a lot of times we're talking about resolutions. That's one of the great things about the Federation, is that you have the power to affect the change that you want to by writing a resolution. If there was something you wanted to do in our state, you could come to Terry or myself, or you could write your own resolution. that you can present at our convention. And if the resolution passed, we as an affiliate would try our best to move forward on that issue and get that completed. For an example, a couple of years ago, the deaf community passed a piece of legislation that all deaf children in the school system who are coming into the public school system would have a deaf mentor. And we could actually pass a piece of legislation like that, and we could start catching those people and making them federationists right from the beginning and instilling that confidence in them right from the beginning. So you have the power to affect change in policies if you want to. And also for the programs, of course, our Bell program, I think our chapter tries to give $500 every year to support those programs. But let me skip one thing. And so, of course, we all want to abide by the Constitution. I'd personally like to see our Constitution updated a little bit to be a little bit more modern. But, if I really want to do that, I can do what? Write a resolution for National Convention. And the final thing I want to talk about, will just take just 30 seconds, Terry, I promise. Final thing I want to talk about is family. And family is not mentioned in the pledge, but I want to talk about it. There are people in this state who are a part of our affiliate that I definitely consider family, that I could call up if I get in some kind of trouble, if I'm having issues, that would encourage me, that would do anything to try and help me. And I can switch that around, that if they needed me in the middle of the night and they needed help, I would be there. There are people around this country, and if you're listening, you know who you are, that this is a family. If you need me, if you call on me, I will be there. And I know we're not all going to super duper like each other. I know that. But you're part of my family, and I'm going to do the best I can to help you. And I know that I have family members that are going to do the same thing for me. So that's why I'm a federationist. And it's also why I think you should be a federationist.
Thank you, James. Very powerful. Yeah, let's hear it for James. Thank you again. We're going to move on with our next presentation. I know Dr. Fred Schroeder is on the line. Fred, are you unmuted? Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Oh my goodness. We have to put up with this morning? Okay, all right.
All right. That's my cheering section I brought.
From Colorado, yeah.
So, Fred, we really appreciate you being with us. And I just want to say a couple of things about Fred. I've known Fred for a long time. And, one of the things about doing a convention virtually like this is we get to bring in some heavy hitters like Dr. Schroeder. I knew Dr. Schroeder before he became an agency director. We were actually, he was an agency director in New Mexico. He was the commissioner of the Rehabilitation Services Administration. He's been the head of the National Rehabilitation Association. He's been a professor at San Diego State University, and now you're still leading the World Blind Union. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So this Dr. Schroeder is, well known, well respected, has a deep history with the National Federation of the Blind, and I'm really excited that we get to have a chance to talk with him today. And we chose to do sort of a one-on-one interview format for this presentation, and so we can sort of pick his brain about some stuff. But first, Fred, tell us about the WBU, the World Blind Union, and what it does and your involvement with that.
So the World Blind Union is an organization that that has organizations as members. In other words, the NFB is a member organization of the World Blind Union, but the WBU, it's not like the Federation in the sense of having individual members. So all of its members are organizations around the world. We have member organizations in about 190 countries. So nearly every country of the world has at least one member organization. I think we have 10 member organizations in the US and so on. There are an estimated 253 million blind and partially sighted people around the world. So it's, you know, it represents a lot of people. Try to advance opportunities.
So, and how long have you been in that position?
Well, I've been president for 4 years. My term was supposed to end in June at our General Assembly, but we've had to postpone it till next June because of COVID-19. So I'm actually doing an extra year as WBU president.
So what have you learned from your experience with WBU in terms of the plight of blind people, the experiences of blind people in other countries as compared to the United States?
Wow, so many things, Terry. I would say at its core, though, what I've learned is that the root problem or the root barrier to full inclusion is the same and around the world, and that is low expectations, misunderstanding about blindness, and the assumption that blind people are incapable of doing the things that other people do. Now, depending on the country, of course, that plays out differently in different countries, but that low expectation is still the root cause. Also, what I found is how powerful the NFB is as a source of encouragement to blind people around the world. The NFB is known as the most progressive and effective organization in the blindness field around the world, and people look to us not just in terms of the mechanics, how we advocate and the programs and so on that we initiate, but more centrally at our philosophy and the concept of blind people being in charge of guiding their own destiny. Opportunities around the world in some parts are very, very bleak. Many parts of the world, blind children just simply have no access to education. And if you think about it, I mean, that's different than here in the US, but it's the same basic root problem. In other words, in a very, very poor country where you have just very limited resources, why would you spend those resources to educate a child who has no hope of a productive life? So it's low expectations. The assumption that these children will grow up and need the care of friends and family, won't be able to work, won't be able to take care of themselves. So assuming there's no point in educating them. Now in the US, we get an education, but that same low expectation still constricts opportunities.
So let's talk a little bit about the Federation. You've been active with the Federation for many, many years. Just sort of walk us through your journey with the Federation.
So I joined the Federation in 1974, so quite a long time ago. I was 17 years old. I had recently lost all of my vision and was at the Orientation Center for the Blind, a training center in California. I didn't know anything about the Federation when I got to the training center, but what I learned later is that the California Center, while it was not as developed as the program in Iowa, at that time, it was probably second best to the Iowa program that Dr. Jernigan created, because Dr. Jernigan had worked at the California agency and it helped shape the services. So it was good quality training. At the same time, I met a young guy who became probably my closest friend for many years. And he was involved in the Federation. And I think that one of the things, and I kind of harken back to James's comments earlier, you know, one of the things that I think was important in my experience. My friend Jim believed in me, cared about me, and wanted to get me involved in the Federation. And at that time, I had no interest in the Federation. I frankly saw blindness as devastating. And I thought, what's the point? I thought, how depressing. Get a bunch of blind people together. I mean, what could be more depressing than that? But he befriended me, and that's the family that James was talking about, and didn't give up on me, got me to go to a convention. And my first convention, state convention, was in the fall of 1974. And I've been involved ever since.
Great. So we hear the term thrown around a lot about the Federation philosophy. What does that term really mean to you, Federation philosophy?
To me, it means putting blindness in its objective, logical perspective. In other words, recognizing that society has low expectations for blind people, but it also means recognizing that as blind people, we do some things differently. Dr. Jernigan really summed up our philosophy in a powerful way in many of his speeches. He would talk about given training and opportunity, the average blind person can compete in the average place of business on terms of equality with his or her sighted peers. So training, you have to be able to travel, you have to be literate, you have to be able to cook a meal and take care of yourself. You need training. There are alternative methods of functioning that we use. But you couple that with opportunity, that the barrier to employment after training is an attitudinal barrier, a social barrier. And Terry, you ran the programs for blind and deaf people in Tennessee for many years. Were involved as a professional in rehabilitation. And I think you'll agree with what I'm about to say. When I ran the program in New Mexico, it just simply is not that hard to prepare a blind person to work competitively. It's not hard. What is very hard is getting employers to believe it and to hire blind people. That's the difficult part. So training and opportunity, training being that you really master the skills of blindness, and then opportunity being that we work collectively for social change to expand opportunities that are limited not by blindness, but by low expectations. There are some things I cannot do as a blind person. You know, I can't, at least today, be an Uber driver. Okay, but that doesn't mean I need to spend my life lying in bed, crying and miserable and lonely and depressed. It means putting blindness in what I consider to be a logical perspective. I can't go out and drive a car. Okay, so I just simply need to look for alternative techniques. I got to tell you, Terry, one of the great stories that Dr. Jernigan told when he was a little boy at the Tennessee School for the Blind, he and his friends would be playing with a ball, and occasionally they'd lose the ball. You know, somebody'd throw it and then they couldn't find it. And so what these little guys did is they would lie down head to toe, making a long line of little blind boys, and then they would roll in the direction of the ball until they found it. And I thought, man, you know, a creative strategy, absolutely. But it really speaks to Federation philosophy. In other words, I've lost the ball, I can't see it, so therefore what? I can't find it? No, what these guys did is they said, okay, I can't see it to find it, so I have to figure out another way of getting done what I need to get done. I will participate, and I may use an alternative technique to do it, but I will participate.
So was there any point in time that you sort of had that aha moment, or that you, when you fully embraced the NFB philosophy and started really applying it to the way you live your life?
I don't know that there was an aha moment per se. It was a long developmental process for me. When I finished my training at the Orientation Center in California, January of 1975, I started college, and I was a member at that point. And my good friend Jim Fox, who had gotten me involved in the Federation, I was talking to him one time, and I was telling him how much trouble I was having taking notes. And I was recording my lectures, and Jim told me how inefficient that was. And I said, yeah, but I'm not fast enough on the slate to keep up. And to make a long story short, Terry, he wouldn't just let me sell myself out. One of the things he found out when talking to me, I was using 100-weight Braille paper with my slate to take notes. He said, you know, that's, you're going to wear yourself out. He said, use regular typing paper. It's not like you're transcribing a book that's got to last a lifetime. These are notes, and you're going to use them for a semester and throw them out. And he told me, start thinking of your own abbreviations, your own shorthand. So, for example, I was a psychology major. So I would use PS for anything related, you know, in my notes, PS could be psychology, psychological, you know, my own notes. Nobody else had to read them. But essentially what he said to me is, don't assume that you cannot take your own notes. You're having trouble taking notes, and that's a real problem. But just like these little guys trying to find that lost ball, start experimenting. But you experiment because you fundamentally believe that there is a solution, and the challenge is to find that solution. So I wish there were kind of that light switch, aha moment, and maybe there was in my mind, but actually the applying it day to day in life, that was an ongoing process.
I want to ask you that tricky question that we deal with as blind people. And you know, on the one hand, we have the desire to be independent. On the other hand, there are sometimes we can take advantage of perks simply because we are blind people that we may not really need. How do we balance that desire to be independent with taking advantage of some of these perks that might be available to us?
So starting with the premise that if you take something that is offered that you really don't need, really the only damage is to yourself. Oh, you could say, all right, if I show up to vote and somebody rushes out and says, oh, you don't have to wait in line. And I say, oh, great. And I take cuts in line based on blindness, even though there's no reason I can't stand in line just like anybody else. Oh, you could argue that what I've done is I've reinforced low expectations in the mind of that voting official and maybe the other people standing around. But their low expectations are pretty well cemented already. The real damage is not to them or to their attitude so much as to me, to my own self-respect. Why would I do that? Why would I accept a role that, or I should say, a privilege that is given to me not because I need it, not because it's part of access, but based on low expectations about blindness. I don't have a magic answer, about here is what we should take and here is what we shouldn't take. I remember when my kids were little, my wife and I took them to Disneyland, and then we went one day to Universal Studios. And at Universal Studios, they wanted to let us in half price, and we said no. And I don't know if you've been to Universal Studios, but the whole thing is visual. I mean, we went to this thing where they showed how they did special effects. We went to a water ski exhibition. We went to this place where they showed, you know, how they did car crashes for videos. So the whole day was bang, crash, boom. And we walked out, and Kathy and I looked at each other and said, you know, next time I'm going to take the half price. I got zero out of this. I mean, we were kidding, but you know, should you, shouldn't you, what's the harm? You know, the harm is potentially to you. Do you start cutting corners because you can, instead of having some self-respect? So there you go, Terry.
So I was going to ask, and I think you answered the question. You know, what can we as individuals, you know, not the federation, but what can we as individuals do to raise expectations? And I think you just answered part of that. Do you have anything to add to that?
You know, it gets bound up in the question of, like, when, you know, do you spend all day, every day trying to educate society? Well, that would exhaust anybody. But you do look for opportunities to educate where you can. One of the things we do, and you'll see this in our chapter presidents lists and in our state affiliate lists, somebody, maybe you guys get a young scholarship winner, and that person wants to become, I don't know, pick a field, an accountant. Well, if you don't know a blind accountant in Tennessee, you reach out to that federation family and say, we've got a young person here who wants to be an accountant. Is there somebody in your affiliate who can help this young man or woman? And what does that help consist of? Well, you know what it consists of, Terry? First of all, saying to that person, what you want to do is not unreasonable. You aren't being stubborn. You aren't being unrealistic. You're wanting to live your life, and we're going to support you in that. And it means plugging them into a network where then they can start getting help. You know, how, you know, in my class, I'm being asked to do X. How did you do it? And having that support system. I remember years ago, probably 15 years ago, when rollerblades, inline skates first became popular, probably 20 years ago now. Anyway, on the student division, our national student division listserv, somebody said, you know, I want to go rollerblading. How do, you know, what do people do to go rollerblading using a cane? And boom, there were probably dozens of responses. Young blind people sharing ideas with each other. But again, what was the powerful part? The powerful part was, here was a young blind person who wanted to do a normal thing, didn't really know how to do it, but rather than just saying, I guess it can't be done, because of the federation, said, you know, maybe there is a way to do it that I haven't thought of, and reached out to the federation family. So, you know, we're not going to change the attitudes of everybody in society. And part of being able to deal with that is our own internal strength. And none of us can maintain that in isolation. We have to encourage each other, support each other. So, Terry, I know we're at the end of our time, but I mean, you know, I've been in the Federation since 1974, and yet I gained from listening to James a half hour ago. It's something that I need to keep reinforcing in myself. And I think for all of us, the more we reach out and support one another, the more fulfilling our own lives will end up being.
Dr. Schroeder, I really appreciate it. I have many more questions here that we could ask, and this is, the group would probably be happy if we just continue this conversation for another 30 minutes. Very powerful stuff. I want everybody to know that, Dr. Schroeder is a friend of mine. I've considered him to be a mentor of mine. I call on him for advice on different things and to get his input. We work together. He's doing a great job advocating on our behalf for some of the things that we're trying to get included legislatively. We'll be passing resolutions on some of that stuff this afternoon, and Dr. Schroeder's been really helpful in that. Dr. Schroeder, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you a good rest of your weekend, and hopefully someday soon we'll all be together and we can I can buy you that drink out of you.
All right, sounds good. And
right.
Good luck on the rest of the convention. All
right, thanks, Fred.
Worley.
Worley.
Worley. Hey, Fred, have you gone? Are you still there?
Yeah.
I don't want you to go yet because I want you to hear this. You need to hear it. I'm going to just comment just so that my Tennessee brothers and sisters know that their national rep has not left. But I want to tell you guys who haven't heard Fred Schroeder speak over the years, I have been to state conventions and they introduce Fred Schroeder and the place goes silent for 45 minutes and he hasn't even looked at a note. One of the most important leaders of the Federation in my life. There's the Dr. Jernigans and there's the Dr. Tenbrooks and the Mowers and this wonderful Mark Riccobono and the Terry Smith. There are a half a dozen of those people that when they enter a room, what they say has intellect, merit, capacity. It's just all and heart, all driven by heart. And I just had to say that. I don't think I've ever commented publicly about what you have meant to me and so many others. And I wouldn't have ever thought about becoming a national representative 25 years ago if I hadn't been inspired by some of the things that you have done. And a lot of things people don't even know, many, many things that Terry would know and I might know that you have done behind the scenes for us all. And so I just had to thank you for that. The only other thing I would say is with regard to understanding sort of how to live independently, when to take perks, when not to, I really recommend strongly The Nature of Independence. You guys, all of you in the affiliate, The Nature of Independence is my view, sort of this generation's seminal piece of literature. I haven't seen one written better since 1992, but Mark Riccobono might, you never know. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Kevin.
And again, thanks, Dr. Schroeder. We're going to move on to our next presenter. We've got Rachel Kuntz from Blindness Inc. in Minnesota. Going to talk to us about the center there and how they help people live the life they want. We've been talking about independence and we've been talking about low expectations. Blindness Inc. does a good job of helping people become independent and helping them overcome those low expectations. I saw her on here earlier. I'm assuming you're here, Rachel, so please welcome. Rachel.
I am here.
Oh, go, Rachel.
I want to say thank you for putting me on after Dr. Schroeder. I really,
sorry about that.
No pressure on my end here. I'm going to talk about, my name is Rachel Kuntz, as was said, and I work for Blind Inc. And I'm the resource development coordinator there. And also I'm a graduate of Blind Inc. Blind Inc. actually is one of 3 very awesome training centers that the National Federation of the Blind has in its playbook. And if you are interested in any of them, we've got one in Louisiana, which many of you are familiar with, one in Colorado, of course. And then we've got our guy up here in Blind.
Had a single admission last night during their downtime.
We got one up here in Minneapolis here that is which I'm at. And I always like to tell people that our training centers are the National Federation of the Blind's philosophy in action. So what we are doing is taking people who are at all different levels of blindness, doesn't matter what level you are, because we will work with you and you're under blindfolds the whole time. So it doesn't matter. You can have low vision, high vision, no vision, doesn't matter. We're all the same. And what we do is we help you create a little pie. I like to visualize a nice, delicious pie in Tennessee. I don't know what type it would be, but something really good, of course. And the three things that are in that pie that are most valuable to you and your success are confidence, your attitude about blindness, so your own personal philosophy, your positive attitude about blindness. And the third thing is training and having very good blindness skills training. And we often, depending on where you're from, we like to shortchange the training part of things to do the quickest route to getting back to work. And I have found through my life that doing it quickest is not necessarily the best approach for some of us. So at any of the training centers, you will find that the training piece of it's roughly the same. We all sort of focus on Braille and technology and all the different levels of types of cooking, from we have gas to grill to instant pressure cookers, whatever. Travel wise, we're all going to be focusing on those problem solving skills in all the areas really, but the problem solving skills of not just teaching a person how to go from from your house to work or from your house to the grocery. It's about teaching you how to actually travel and make up independent decisions on a daily basis, because we all know that life changes and it does it very quickly. And sometimes we have to really think on our feet and develop those problem solving skills, which I think for some strange reason, we are often, as blind people, people like to solve problems for us. God bless them all. So anyway, we want to work on developing our own problem solving skills so we can get out there and do what we need to do. So the training piece of it is critical, but without the other two, without that confidence that you get from at a National Federation of the Blind Training Center, you're going to get all types of opportunities for confidence building. So here in Minneapolis, we'll be kayaking and dog sledding and doing all kinds of stuff. But the little stories that you get when you have a chance to make a meal for 40 people, you can't even imagine how powerful that is when you're sitting in front of an employer who is not saying this out loud, because they wouldn't be so crazy as to say this out loud, but inside their head, they might be a little skeptical about what a blind person can do. And you can offer up a really interesting story about how you once made a meal for 40 people under a blindfold, or, using a gas stove or whatever it is. And I'm going to bet that for the most part, most people you're going to encounter, sighted or not, aren't going to have had that experience. So you're going to have a powerful way to talk about how unique you are and how talented you were at putting this whole meal together and making a lot of people very happy. So it's stories like that that you get to have in your little wheelhouse to help keep your confidence up down the road, that are really important. And then at a National Federation of the Blind Training Center, your attitude about blindness is strongly developed, and it's important. Every single day, you're going to encounter someone or something that is going to try to tick away at that sense of confidence. But if you have a good attitude about blindness and a great attitude, a great personal philosophy about yourself, you won't let those things take you down. So the way we help with philosophy is that, we have seminars every week that focus on developing those soft skills to work on all those different barriers you may or may not have even realized you had in your own mind. And then to work on recognizing the low expectations that were set on you through family and other places in work, so that you're prepared for that next phase of your life. The other thing is that at all of our training centers, we have our leadership is blind, our board is blind, most of our staff are blind. So we walk the walk. And then of course the staff who isn't blind or who aren't blind are blind at heart. So everyone there walks the walk and has a very high expectation of you as the person coming throughout the whole process. So for me,
It's different than doing it on the phone.
Oh, are you on mute? So at Blinding, I just want to mention that, we are teaching in person right now, and we do that with some COVID-19 protocols. So people are wearing masks and our class sizes are smaller than normal, but we are teaching in person here in Minneapolis. So if people are interested in joining one of our training centers, or you want more information about Blind Inc., Terry will, I'm sure you'll be willing to share out that information for people to look up later, since I don't think we'll have time for questions here. But I want you to think about your personal life and think about if you had if you spent 9 months somewhere of your life and knew that afterwards that everything for you that you thought you could possibly do in life, but you just haven't been able to yet, would be possible, would you take that chance? I did, and I don't regret it at all. One of my favorite things about the fact that I attended Blind Inc. was that my son, he noticed the change in me. And had I met the NFB earlier in my life, I would have jumped on the chance much sooner. And that way, maybe the things that I have regrets on in life, which, we all do, would have been somewhat different. So I hope that you guys will take a chance and consider it if you're in the process of thinking about what you're going to do for the next part of your life, and training is something that you're looking into. Think about that whole self, that whole pie, because you want all three of those things: confidence and good attitude about blindness, and the good blindness skills training. And those are the key things that are going to make you be able to be a success at whatever it is you want to do.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And
Hey,
right,
you're welcome.
We're not going to have time for questions, but we really appreciate you you joining us. You guys do great work up there, and we're going to be passing a resolution today that's going to encourage the state to allow more people to go out of state. So thank you again, Rachel. So
hey, you're welcome.
Melissa, you got. We're going to do a quick. I use a presidential liberty. Betty Tucker was on earlier, having technical difficulties, so she's going to get a e-card gift certificate from TABM. I'll let her get with him to work that out, what that is. And next, we got a $25 Amazon gift card from the Nashville chapter. Melissa, who is it?
That is going to be Stephanie Bailey.
Stephanie Bailey, are you on here? You need to unmute if you're here.
It's *6, guys, if you're on the phone, to unmute.
Stephanie Bailey.
While they wait for her, Rachel, I'd never heard you present before. Very, very nicely done. I'm thinking about going to Blind Inc.
Okay, Melissa, give us another name.
Okay, it's going to be Robin Warren.
Robin, are you here?
Robin Warren.
Looks like, Melissa, you're decked out in your orange. It's football day.
You better believe it.
Robin, are you here?
It's unmuted. Okay.
Robin, going once. Okay, we're going to try one more, then we're moving on.
And I bet you this person is on here. Russell Jones.
Russell?
Russell?
Russell, are you here?
Maybe not.
Oh. RJ,
Okay.
come on, man.
We're gonna move on to our next presenter then. Every year we have our favorite librarian join us, and from I still call it the Library for the Blind. I'm sorry, but Ruth Hemphill. Ruth, are you here?
Sure. I'm waving, but of course that's silly when I'm waving at blind people, but I wave at dogs too.
I see you now. You came on. All right, Ruth, welcome to the 2020 convention of the National Federation of the Blind. Anxious to hear what you got to say. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. A big advantage of Zoom calls is more people can get on them, but a disadvantage is that people can slip out of the room and go do something else, like change their laundry, and then they miss out on your prizes.
That's right.
I did hear the end of the Ms. Kuntz's presentation, and trust me, you're just as tough to follow as evidently Dr. Schroeder was. So, but I'm here. You all know about the library. And as Terry said, I sometimes still say Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. After all, I said that for 25 years, at least, between here and Missouri, before we changed to the Library for Accessible Books and Media. And sometimes I flip and say Library for Excessive Books and Media, but I don't think that's too appropriate. So please pardon me if I do say it that way. I am here. We have, it's been an interesting year for everyone, everything. We're shut down last spring. You know, your conference was supposed to be last spring, and we were shut down for about 6 weeks. The reader advisors and I still took phone calls and placed phone orders but our circulation staff was not in. So we had a long time where no one, was sent any books. And in that time, those of you who use Bard, well, it didn't really matter too much. We got a lot of people using Bard. For some people, it was a technological challenge, but some people I never thought did eventually become able to use Bard. However, we are back. The circulation staff pretty much comes in most every day. We do ship books in and out just about every day. And the reader advisors and phone answers, including myself, go in now and then. Kathy and I go in about every other day. The rest are still working from home. The state was kind enough, well, you could say kind enough. They sent us home with laptops and internet telephone headsets, and we've been able to answer the phone and work along just almost as if we were still there. Though sometimes my phone doesn't work real good. I'm hoping you can hear me because I was using a headset with a microphone when I did these Zoom calls, but that stopped working. So I'm hoping you all are hearing me.
We hear you
I'm
fine.
babbling on with you. Good. Glad to hear. Some of you, most of you have probably noticed that beginning at around the little before the first of the year, we started sending out our audiobooks in a somewhat different format. We had tested this with a few of you beforehand, but now we're putting 8 to 10, sometimes more, sometimes less, audiobooks onto one single cartridge. There's a lot of advantages to that. It means that you don't have to keep up with as many cartridges. You don't have to worry about whether you put this book back into the right cartridge, because it doesn't matter what case you put the cartridge back in. We're using the barcode on the back of the cartridge itself now. And if you're wanting to read books in a series and you want to read them one after another, we can put a whole series, depending on how long the series is, of course, on one cartridge. So you can do that one after another. So it's a lot of advantage. You don't have nearly as much, take up as much space on the shelf. And that's a big advantage for us because we had a huge amount of shelving and a huge amount of cartridges and cases. And some of them didn't circulate very much at all, like Plato's Republic, but it's something a library has to have. And I have sent it out a couple times this year, actually. So you have to have them. But it is taking up space on the shelf, and most years it sits there and gets dusty. Now we don't have to use that much shelf space, and now we're so excited about it because we don't have to move so much stuff into our new building, which we're going to move into next spring. And I know I've been talking about that for years, and I will talk about that a little more later. But so it's been an advantage, but a big, huge advantage is that everything is always available. So if I have the latest book by John Grisham and I'm reading it and you want to read it, you don't have to wait till I finish reading it and send it back to the library and then the library sends it out to you. Just like people in who use Bard, you can get it as soon as you call and ask for it. You still if you're still getting things in the mail, you still kind of have to wait for the mail, but it doesn't take nearly as long. And speaking of the mail, I'm sure you've heard in the news about how the mailing has slowed down and they're worried about the post office funding and all that. And I'm assuming the post office will continue to exist, but it is true. We have noticed that the mail is going slower. Free matter was always slower than first class mail. I don't care what the post office says. We know it was always slower, but it is even slower now. And another negative effect of that is that once a book gets to the library, it's delivered in this big, huge mail hamper to the library. It sits in that hamper for 5 days in quarantine before we even touch it and take it off your file. So this may mean that even though you returned a book last week, it may not get checked into the week after next. So keep that in mind. I've told a lot of patrons, they'll say, well, I returned all 3 of my books last week, and why haven't you sent me anything? Well, they haven't been checked in yet. We hear that. We often will go ahead and override and send another cartridge out to book. When I say book, I mean a cartridge out to with 8 or 10 books on. Depends on how many times we've overridden and done that. Because we know it's probably sitting here at the library and you can't help that. But my point is, when you finish a cartridge, don't wait till you finish the second one. Go ahead and send that first one back immediately, because otherwise, if you do, like a lot of people, wait till they've read all 3 of those cartridges, then they're going to have to wait a while till they get another one, unless they call and ask. So be a good idea to go ahead and do that. Several of you over the years have asked about the downloading Braille books to a Braille display. So I know some of you have them, but NLS is still looking at hopefully being able to provide them eventually. I know they've done some testing in Massachusetts and I think another state of loaning out Braille displays. And hopefully that will happen. I'm not sure. I can't say when. I don't even want to hazard a guess until we start getting some to distribute. But I know it will happen, and I'm very excited about it because I'm pretty sure it will increase people's usage of Braille, which is very important to me because so often people say, well, your Braille doesn't circulate. And those of you who have been here with a couple years know that we have started borrowing our Braille from Perkins due to the fact that our Braille collection took up over half of our shelf space. And it certainly wasn't half of the usership. So we're borrowing from Perkins, but I think the more people read in Braille, the more likelihood it is that it will continue. No one ever says we don't need print anymore because we have audio. People say frequently we don't need Braille anymore because we have audio. And when I quote that to them that, well, does that mean we don't need print anymore? We have audio, they kind of back off. So I do appreciate because we do want to keep Braille circulating. And I'm happy to say that the director of the National Library Service has always been a strong supporter of Braille. Back when Kurt Silke was director, he was a very strong supporter of it. And Karen Kinninger definitely is because she is an avid Braille reader and she's very active at reading Braille. So I don't think Braille is being endangered. However, some of you have probably noticed that you may not have gotten any Braille magazines after COVID. And that was true. Unfortunately, the producers of hard copy Braille shut down for a while. They are coming back. They're starting to send them out again. They're trying to catch up. We've gotten some in ourselves. Some of our patrons have gotten some. But if you're specifically looking for a Braille magazine that you would subscribe to, give us a call next week and we can look into it and see if that magazine has been shipped yet. And so, as I said, we're continuing to move on. I mentioned that we are planning to move into a new building. It's the entire Tennessee State Library and Archives will be moving. The building is up. It's not finished. If you happen to be in Nashville and drive by, you'll see it's a huge building. And it's beautiful. It's not my style of architecture, but it is very nice architecture. And we're hoping to move in around February, March. You know, these things depend on weather and everything. The original plan was that we would be moving now in October and opening in November, but you all know we had a hurricane come through in March and it really didn't do a whole lot of damage to either. It didn't do any to the building we're in now, but to that new building, but it did take out a bunch of windows and they had to be reordered and replaced. So that slowed the process down a bit. And, you know, that was right as COVID was hitting. So getting supplies in was slower too, but it's still ongoing and I didn't put it back too far. Let's see if I missed anything else I've missed in my notes. Oh yeah. I've been asked by several patrons recently if they have heard rumors that we don't have players anymore. We do. There's two things that I think are causing this rumor. Several years ago, the National Library Service contract with the company in Shanghai that was making the players ended because the National Library Service thought we had a huge quantity of players and they were sitting on the shelves. And so they aren't making any more brand new ones for a while. And we've been rebuilding and recirculating players that have been returned in good working order. And sometimes those players seem to be in good working order when they're in our office, but by the time they get to you, they may not be. And I will admit, we did have a day or two a couple weeks ago when we had completely ran out, but we did get a shipment of repaired players in this week. So we're doing okay with them right now. If you get a replacement player and if you need a replacement player and your player is working a little bit, like you'll only work plugged in, I would keep it till you get the replacement. But if it's not working at all, go ahead and return it. But then once you get the replacement, return and you test it out, return one of them because we're, like I said, it's kind of tight on players right now. Now, those of you who are downloading from Bard and using a tablet, or if you're using your smartphone or Kindle, something like that, and you're not using your player much anymore, it's stuck in a closet and you're dusting it. If you're using it, fine, keep it and do both. But if you're not using it, go ahead and send it back to us because we might need it for a patron who doesn't have one and doesn't have access to Bard. Speaking of Bard, again, I want to emphasize that it is a good service if you have internet access. The sound quality of the audio materials would depend on the sound quality of the device you're using. I had a gentleman ask me yesterday, he's just getting signed up for the service. And he was actually just filling out his application for service, but he had all kinds of questions. So he called. He didn't know whether he should mark himself as reading disabled or vision impaired because he's not blind. And I always think to myself, well, why would we have vision impaired on there if you couldn't sign up without being blind? But anyway, but then he asked me, well, will your audiobooks work with Bluetooth headset? I said, no, our player doesn't work with a Bluetooth headset. I'm sorry. He said, but what if I download it and put them on my, he said, the books I download from one of the commercial audiobooks producers work on my tablet with Bluetooth. I said, well, if your tablet works with Bluetooth, then our books will work with Bluetooth. It just depends on the device. So that works out really well. I just want to make sure, though, that all of you know, if you subscribe to magazines and you read them in audio format, you can also download those from Bard. You don't have, again, I'm not saying you have to. We will continue to mail them to you if you wish, but you can download them. You'll get them quicker because they're up on Bard faster than they're put on a cartridge, and you don't have to wait for the mail. And you can also subscribe to a magazine now on Bard. So that what that means is when a new issue is put up onto Bard, you will get notification. It will go onto your wish list immediately too, so you can get it really quickly that way. And the only other thing I wanted to bring up, I think, let me look at my notes to make sure I've covered everything. Because unlike some people, I have to have notes. Oh, we do have our book club, our quarterly book club that I hope I've mentioned here a couple times. It meets in January, April, July, and October. And our October meeting is tomorrow at 1 Central Time. We have read Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, and we are going to be discussing it. And our own Yvonne Newbert is going to lead the discussion. I'm so glad she's willing to do that. We're really looking forward to it. It's an interesting book. It's a tough book to read. By that, I mean, the plot line is tough. The writing is phenomenal. And I don't really, to be honest, I don't really read books for the writing style, although a lot of people do. One of my coworkers is very much into, it doesn't matter how good the plot line is, it reads for the beauty of the writing. And this is very good writing. I can understand why it won a Pulitzer Prize. I can understand why it won a National Book Award, but it's not a happy story. Someone pointed out to me, though, it is kind of timely for what we're going through right now. And I can understand that point. I'm sure we're going to have a great discussion. I'm really looking forward to it. We've got some new people signed up to join us. It just depends on what we read. Someone once said to me, well, what types of books does your book club read? We read everything from Grapes of Wrath to Gone Baby Gone to The Little Prince to The Martian. We read a lot of things. What we do is at the end of the book club discussion, we talk about what we want to read next, and then we have an email vote on, and well, if people don't have email, I'll call them to get their vote on what people want to read, and the one that wins is the one we read the next time. And it's probably obvious, Grapes of Wrath was not my choice because I read it before, but I had read it a long time ago, and so I'm glad I reread it. It is a very good book. So if you would like to join our book club, I like to have pre-registrations, but if you would like to join our book club, call in to the Tennessee State Library and Archives conference line at 1 tomorrow, and you can join. The number is 866-805-6620, and if you're in the Nashville area, it's 615-253-8957. And if you don't have those, didn't get a chance to put those down, send me an email or call me on Monday, and I can Monday morning before noon, preferably, and I can give you those phone numbers again. And I think that's all I have. If you have time, don't have time for questions, I
No,
understand.
we're
You
not
can
going to have
always-
time for questions, Ruth, but we really appreciate you joining us and look forward to you being with us in person next year.
Absolutely. I certainly hope so. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Appreciate the job you do. Okay, next up, you know, as the president, I get a lot of emails, and you know, I would always get these emails from the blind history lady, and so I said, you know, I got to checking and thinking, well, wow, that might be something interesting for state convention, and I reached out to Peggy Chong, who is the blind history lady, and she graciously agreed. She's in Aurora, Colorado, so again, we get to bring somebody in from out of state, and so. You know, I'm tempted to call this presentation Digging Up Bones, but because it's out of the country music song, but it's Digging Up Tennessee. Welcome the blind history lady.
Woohoo, Colorado, woohoo!
I brought my own cheering section. Hello, everybody. Thanks, Terry, for having me come and everything. I enjoy learning blind history, and I'm hoping you can all hear me. I got this new set of headphones, so I'm still testing it out.
Loud and clear.
Great. So I have been researching blind people. I call them my blind ancestors for more years than I'd like to admit to. I was given the job of cleaning out the NFB of Minnesota files back around 1979, 80. And they said, well, you go clean them out because you're going to know most of the people in there. I had grown up in the NFB. I had known all of the blind piano tuners, the rug weavers, the door-to-door salesmen, was kind of embarrassed by them. I thought it was really a shame that they didn't try to do anything different with their lives. But once I started to go through those files, I was running across names of blind people doing jobs that were interesting. So if it was stuff I was supposed to throw out, I kept it for myself, although I threw out a lot of stuff I truly regret to this day. I started to read about our blind congressman. This was a Minnesota blind congressman in the 1920s that I had not known anything about and was really surprised. Guess what? The name wasn't in the letters or the information. Everybody just assumed they knew who they were talking about. So he became my first blind ancestor that I began to research. And we've talked about it a lot today, this morning in the presentations about low expectations or being realistic and building on your self-confidence. And these blind ancestors that I've been researching have built on my self-confidence, have built on my energy as a blind person. So many times you're told you need to be realistic. You need to, just accept the fact that a blind person can't do everything. And yet we have had blind people in this country who have been bankers, deep water divers, inventors. The sighted people in this country depend every day on a blind inventor who invented cruise control. How many of us know about that kind of thing and how empowering that would be? How empowering it would be for a rehab professional, a social worker, a counselor, when you go in and say, I've just lost my vision and I've been a banker, I don't think I can do that anymore. And the social worker would say, well, there hasn't been a banker in Tennessee that I know that's been blind, but there have been a few across the country from time to time. Let's explore that idea. How empowering that would be, rather than saying to you, well, I agree, I don't think that's a very realistic thing. So anyway, I decided to start digging around in Tennessee. I had found a few things about Tennessee, and after Terry contacted me, I dug a little deeper and have a few things I'd like to share. First of all, since the library preceded me on the agenda, I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to let you know a little bit about library services in Tennessee. Now, we didn't have a library for the blind in 1910, but the Tennessee School for the Blind did have a library that, if they were not using the books, and somebody really wanted them during the school year, but mostly during the summer, they would loan out their library books. And so in 1910, there were about 60 persons that were borrowing about 74 volumes of American Braille, and these were borrowed from the school, like I said. I want to make it clear that this was American Braille. Tennessee was pretty good at coming in on the Braille bandwagon early on. Other schools were not. They would have Moon Type, they would have New York Point, English Braille, raised print. So you could have, especially like in Iowa, you could have to learn 4 different formats your first semester of school so that you could get through your school books. In 1912, the Memphis Cassetti Library, I think that's what it's called, they had a small collection of books in their library for blind folks. And in 1920, oh, and that was started by the American Library Association, by the way. They were encouraging public libraries to have a reading room for the blind, and some of the larger libraries included books that were in a raised format. In 1920, there was a home teacher started in Tennessee, and the home teachers became sort of like your traveling library.
7806.
The home teacher brought you reading material to read, spent a little time with you during the time that they were in town teaching you Braille, or in Tennessee it was Braille, excuse me, leaving you some material. When you were done, they picked it up and gave it to the next person, or they would ask you to share it with the other people in your town if they were working with several people. Share your material, practice, and keep reading. I also poked around in the veterans files in Tennessee and found some interesting statistics. Now, this is just a sampling because I have not spent time going through every Tennessee or every veterans cards that I can find because I simply just can't go down and look at them. They don't have them available for you to look at unless you go into DC or someplace. But in World War I took a sampling of 22 men who registered for service who were already blind. There were 15 whites and 7 blacks. Now, that doesn't mean that that's all that there was. This is just the sampling that I found. 5 of the white men were not working. 3 of the black men were not working. 7 of the white men were employed. 5 of the black men were unemployed. And there were 2 students, 1 black and 1 white. In World War II, I took a sampling of about 95 folks. And sorry, our chapter meeting is starting to get started and people can't get in. Sorry about that. In World War II, there was a sampling of 95 blind men that I found in the files. There were 72 whites, 23 blacks. Of the unemployed, there were 36 white. Of the unemployed, there were 36. 19 were white, 17 were black. There were several students. There were 16 white students and 4 black students. Most of these were at the School for the Blind. They were not in college. Unlike in World War I, they were both in college. These were students at the School for the Blind that were eligible for the draft. There were 10 employed. There were 8 whites and 2 blacks employed. This was a statistic that I found kind of, well, surprising, especially because I came from the North. There were several sheltered shops by World War II in Tennessee, and there were 26 of these men working in sheltered shops. They were all white. There was not a single one registered that I could find who was black working in a sheltered shop. So that was kind of a surprise to me. The other thing that was a surprise to me, and it's only recently that I've been noticing this, and they've been in southern states, is that when you went to the draft board they asked you for your next of kin. And in Tennessee, many of them, especially those that were working in the sheltered shops and the older students at the School for the Blind, but actually a couple of them that were unemployed, listed the Tennessee Commission for the Blind as their next of kin. I noticed that in one other southern state as well. And I thought that's something I'm going to start paying attention to. How many of these people who were blind when they were asked to register ended up using an agency for the blind, and what did that mean in their families? Some of that is going to take a lot of research, and we may not know for 10 to 20 years. But I wanted to look at some of the blind people that I have found. Now, I write a monthly email, like Terry said, and I send it out every month. And I did focus on one gentleman from Tennessee early on, and probably several of you have read that. His name was Edward Scruggs, and he lived from 1854 to 1948. He was blinded as a teen, and he was blinded during the Civil War time. So not only was Tennessee part of the battles of the Civil War, but there weren't a lot of schools that were happening. Children were being taught at home. Families became very poor, lost their land, or the family lost many of the children who came home, worked the land. Lots of reasons, and we won't all go into that. But anyway, he was part of a family that was wealthy before the Civil War, but was not after the Civil War. His father was having a difficult time with farming and so on. So he becomes blind, and he gets a sort of an education from family and friends. He understands that one of the things that blind people do is to become a musician, piano tuner, piano teacher. He didn't know much about music, so his mother did. They got a piano. He tried to become a piano teacher and a piano tuner and basically failed at it. I think he's a really good example of sometimes we push people into things because that's what's expected of them. That's what's realistic. And it wasn't realistic for poor Edward. So he started to help with a building of a house. And then he thought, well, geez, I can do this. So he started to help build from scratch another house. Pretty soon, he's designing and building houses. And to make a long story short, if you wanted to read more about it, you could well, maybe let me know, send me an email and sign up for my email list at theblindhistorylady@gmail.com. And I would be glad to add you to my email list. Edward built up a construction business, and after he was successful, then he figured he was finally good enough as a man to marry. He did, and had children. His construction business, by the way, is now run by his great grandchildren. And if you're looking for Scruggs Construction, you can read more about him on their great grandfather on their website. I was looking at some of the graduates of the Tennessee School for the Blind, and you all probably know this fairly well. This was something that when I went to my first national convention in 1977, was shocked to find out that there were schools for the blind for the white and schools for the blind for the black. So my education continues to this day through the Federation because I learned so much. Anyway, Tennessee, of course, had a school for the blind for the colored. And we have one person that I have found, Bertha Blalark. Bertha lived from 1888 to 1968. She was a student at the Tennessee School and graduated in 1910. She was active in the Black community, active in her church. At the School for the Blind, she became very skilled in piano and organ. And one of the jobs that she got right after she graduated from the school was to play organ at one of the churches. Now, it's not just Sunday services. I mean, she played for the Sunday morning and the Sunday evening services, but for the choir, she was their paid employee at the school, at the church. She got married, had a child, and it's not clear what happened to her husband, but he kind of disappears from any records that I can find. However, I do know that when her daughter passed away, her daughter mentions her father in her obituary. So obviously he was still a part of the life. Bertha now, she's not working through the 1930s, but by 1940, she is teaching music. And by 1950, she is teaching in a school, in a public school, and she is the orchestra leader, the music director for the school. Where she got her credentials to teach and where she taught is still not known for me. I'm still looking into her. She's one of my ancestors in progress here. But here's a woman who did what she needed to do to raise her family. I believe that she worked as a pianist or an organist, many times getting probably compensated not in money, but in other ways, especially during the Depression. And being active in her church certainly helped with that. Another neat Tennessean sort of that I found, this one was through the veterans rolls. His name was Barry Smallwood, and he lived from 1890 to 1967. He attended the School for the Blind in Tennessee. Not clear if he graduated, but he was there at least through 1907. He went to work for his family's construction business, probably left the School for the Blind to do so. He went to the registrar's office and did not tell them that he didn't see very well. So they accepted him into the Army. However, after about 7 days of serving in the Army, they discovered he couldn't see for squat. And so he was medically discharged. This was probably a good thing and maybe not a good thing for him. Why is that? Well, because he went back to the family construction business. They didn't seem to want him now. He tried being a traveling salesman. He sold a line of clothing for a while, but there was a veterans home, one in Ohio and one in Tennessee, that he would go and stay for 6 to 9 months at a time, and then he'd come back out and he'd get a job for a little while, and then he'd go back to the home for 6 to 9 months. At one time, he was there for almost 2 years. He didn't seem to feel like he could produce for his family in the construction business, even though his brothers went on to have that construction business and pass it on to their children. But he just didn't seem like he had the confidence to keep going, which was really a sad thing. There was another student at the Tennessee School for the Blind who I got to know more from my time in New Mexico. His name is James Kelly Woodley. He was born in 1919 and died in 1996. Now, James came from a poor family, and his father died when he was quite young. His mother had trouble keeping the family together. So James, being at the School for the Blind, helped a lot in that she didn't have to support him much of the year. He learned Braille, he learned typing, and when he left the School for the Blind in Tennessee, the school had, at that time, we're talking the late 30s now, had a lot of their students go off to Iowa to the chiropractic school and become chiropractors. James was one of them who did that. The school gave him a glowing reference, talking about how hardworking he was and so on. So he went off to Iowa, gets his schooling as a chiropractor, and travels around a little bit, but finally settles in New Mexico. Gets a job working under a chiropractor in a small town. The chiropractor was quite old and was looking for somebody to take over his business. Only could find James. He wasn't really happy about finding a blind guy, but he needed somebody. And actually, people started to like him. He had a good feel for the body. When he would put his hands on the patients, he could, especially with the cowboys and the um, wranglers and stuff that were out there, they were always throwing their backs out. They got to like James and asked for him specifically. So now the guy keeps him on and he doesn't look for anybody else and passes his business on when he becomes too old to work. That's a business that James had for almost 40 years. He tried to give it up a couple times, but he wasn't satisfied with the people he brought in, so he kept on going. Now, in the 1950s, the chiropractors were starting to become more technology savvy, if you will. And they had all these machines that they were experimenting with that would help them identify problems in the back. James knew from feeling the back that when there was inflammation in the back, that the temperature got hotter. So he and a professor down at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque began to work on a device that would scan the back and identify trigger spots, hot spots in the back. And it would make sounds when you were moving the scanner across the back. It would get higher pitched as the heat or the inflammation would increase. This actually went on the market. And after 2 years, the sighted chiropractors bought it because it was really cool, but they couldn't stand the noise. So they turned it into digitized dials and so on, making it harder for a blind person to actually use. And like I said, he continued in his business for over 40 years. He was part of many of the community activities, their Catholic church. He helped build his own house. He got in the newspapers several times because it was just amazing how a blind person can do that. But now you're looking at these people here who came from Tennessee. A lot of them had to do with construction, which I find funny. Now, Edward did not go to the school for the blind. He went blind about 14. His mom kept him home for a long time. So by the time that they really accepted the fact that he needed some blindness skills, blindness training, he was too old to go to the school. But they're all working at things that they're with their hands, they're self-reliant. Says a lot about some of the early folks in Tennessee. Not everyone had that chance. As we all know, training was not readily available and still isn't readily available to a lot of people, especially if you don't have the confidence to go in and try something that, you know, is out of your comfort zone. So I wanted to just tell you a little bit about, again, why I do this. I think it's very important for us as blind people to know our history, to know our blind ancestors, because it helps us to build on our future, broaden our horizons. Like I said, so many times we're told this is unrealistic. This is not something that a blind person has ever done before. I hope someday that when we go into our curriculums for counselors, social workers, rehabilitation professionals, and so on, that we actually have classes on what the real lives of blind people and other disabilities too, but I hope blind people, of course, what we really did in life, what we really accomplished in life, not just all of these statistics about how many blind people read Braille or how many blind people have a job 6 months after they've graduated from their rehabilitation program, but what they really accomplished in their life. And when I write my stories, I try to find out about the actual skills that the people had. You know, like poor Edward, he really didn't have anything as far as blindness training was concerned. And yet we've got this Barry who had a fair amount of blindness training, although it's not clear if he was taught Braille at the School for the Blind, although I'm sure he probably was, but did he use it after graduation? Not clear. But he had some vision, and look at, he is the one that ended up going in and out of the veterans home, finding a place to live. It's interesting to me every time I think I'm finding a pattern of success, because early on I wanted to know what's the secret for blind people to become successful? What skill do we have to have? What particular training do we have to have? And every time I come up with a pattern, I come up with about 20 people who just break it all to heck. So anyway, I don't know if we have time for questions, Terry, or not, and I do want to be respectful of your agenda, so I'm going to shut up now.
Okay, Peggy, outstanding. Thank you very much for that presentation. There's a lot of history, and I don't know where in the world you find all this stuff. I'm impressed, and I love that headset. I want that headset.
I'm still getting used to it because I can't hear myself in it.
Okay, thank you again. We're going to move on now. We've still got a lot of business to transact. You know, TAGDO has done a great job with you know, creating relationships with the various schools, and Jimmy Bain is going to be up next to celebrate the work that they've been doing with these schools. So Jimmy, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, and so glad to be with you guys this morning. If you are a representative of a guide dog school, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself. We're going to be introducing you in just a second. So if you're one of our guide dog schools reps, we're going to, as you know, give us a little 45-second promo on your schools. So, so one of the things about TAGDO is our focus is on collaboration, advocacy, and relationships. TAGDO has set the standard for other divisions and groups. And we've shown that you can make a difference if you effectively advocate and partner with the schools, building up rather than tearing down, collaboration rather than contention. And because of that, you see as much support at TAGDO events as you see at other events. And it was just so awesome. And there's a reason behind that. And it's because of not only our philosophy and incorporating the Federation spirit and philosophy, but also our leaders, which I want to represent them in a second. But yesterday at our TAGDO seminar, we had 7 schools present, which was awesome. And we had 43 different participants on the call, which was also pretty wonderful. So we had a great, great turnout. So I want to introduce the schools and the reps. I'll mention the name that I have down as the rep in the school. And if that is incorrect, just feel free to tell us who you are, and just brief 45 seconds about your school, because we definitely want to recognize you and our partnership with you. So Wendy Eichler, Leader Dogs. Anyone from Leader Dogs present? All right, they were present with us yesterday, so we were glad. They were at Leader Dog was actually at our first TAGDO seminar 6 years ago when we started out. So they've been part of this whole journey with us. All right, Guide Dogs of America. Anyone from Guide Dogs of America? All right, they were with us yesterday as well. All right, what about GDB, Guide Dogs for the Blind? Do we have our rep? Yeah, that or they're just super quiet. Maybe they didn't get the memo. All right, we also had the Guide Dog Foundation. Anyone from the Guide Dog Foundation on the call? All right. And we also had Fidelco.
Present.
All right. Jump in.
This is Kevin from Fidelco in Bloomfield, Connecticut. Real quick, again, just like last night, thanks for letting us participate and be on the call with everybody. Quick update about our school. 2020 is actually our 60th year anniversary. We are a school that exclusively works with German Shepherds, as well as exclusively doing in community placements. So we go out to you in your neighborhood when we do our placements with our German Shepherds. We're still currently working. We're mostly fully open in terms of training, raising, breeding, and development. We are limited with placements running by the CT health guidelines, unable to go to states that are considered red by the CT guidelines. So we're a little limited with placements. However, we've made 6 this year so far, with 6 more by end of year hopeful. Currently working with 30 dogs in training, with 12 trainers currently active, and we're averaging about 80 to 100 pups a year through our breeding programs.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're very welcome.
Woohoo! Fidelco, yay!
That's right. We got some Fidelco guide users.
You can see, I don't know if my camera's on, you can see a Fidelco German Shepherd laying down here.
Yeah, I don't see it. Don't see him at all.
That would be Onyx, right?
It is Onyx.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Chelsea.
Hey, I'm gonna
you,
jump
Chelsea.
in. I'm gonna jump in real quick and tell everybody about the Thursday afternoon seminar, 3 o'clock. Jimmy, you know about it. And some of the schools are going to be there. We're going to talk chiropractic. We're going to talk T-touch. We're going to talk advocacy, strengthening the rights of guidance service dog handlers, National Federation of the Blind at Colorado State Convention, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, your time, Thursday afternoon. You want info? Let me know. Thanks. Forward, always forward.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. All right. Next to Seeing Eye. Chelsea, are you here with us? Seeing Eye has been another school that has been with us from the very beginning. And so we appreciate their support. Also, Guiding Eyes was another school. Do we have our rep from Guiding Eyes? All right. And then Southeastern was also was represented yesterday. Do we have anyone from Southeastern here? All right. So those are the schools that were present yesterday, and we just have really appreciated the collaboration that we've been able, and the relationships that we've established with them. So if you have a guide, you want a guide, thinking of getting a guide, you love animals, or you want to just be part of a division that reflects the Federation spirit, please join us. You can go to our website, nfbtn.org/tagdo, Tennessee Association Guide Dog Users, get more information about our meetings and how to contact us. We also have a very active Facebook page. And I want to do a shout out to our leaders, President Steve Norman, our Vice President, Christy Odell, our Secretary, Tyler Butler, and our other board members, Byron Meter and Deanna Moore. They've all worked really hard in setting that tone and setting, just showing that leadership as guide dog users. So keep those tails wagging. And thank you so much for your time and your support. I'm sorry?
Hi, it's Kate from Southeastern Guide Dogs. I was having problems with my speaker.
All right, you made it in. You made it right at the end.
Did.
Go for it.
My computer, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that we do have and that will include working with the From Dog Food Company, eligible dogs for their working life. They get their monthly food from From. We work with Elanco, so they get the free monthly preventative trifexis. And then there's also the free annual vet visits that include all of their yearly vaccines for the dog's working life. And we do have a 3-week class, usually goes from like a Sunday to Sunday. And we also have a fitness building that is being built for all of our dogs. So we have a pool for them, but we also have a water treadmill And we also work with, this allows us to focus on, the muscles where the guide dog works, the chest, the back, that type of thing. And this will allow us to tune up the dogs. We can also do rehab for any small injuries or anything like that. And on top of, just get the dogs into shape for when they grow up to be guide dogs.
Awesome. Thank you. Southeastern. And you are in, I don't know if you said what, Florida, right?
We are in Florida, yes. I
In
so
Florida.
apologize.
Nice. Awesome. Well, we're so glad that you were present yesterday, and thanks for being here this morning. And so we've got a great division here. And so we would love to have you part of that division as we continue to grow together. So back to you, Mr. President.
Ag Dude's rocking and rolling. We appreciate the division and what they're doing. Jimmy, I'm gonna give you 60 seconds to mention Custom Canes. That's an organization that you involved with, and so go ahead.
All right, well, I'm gonna start with Abadi Azubui. You might be wondering, what the heck did he just say? Well, that is good morning in Swahili. And that is because I went to Kenya last year through Custom Cane, but our nonprofit, which is called the You Can Give Initiative. And we went to Kenya last year. We brought over 110 canes. We brought 100 solar powered talking Bibles in English and Swahili. We brought clothes. We brought slates and styluses. And we taught mobility using the NFB search and discovery. And so one of the things that we found out there is they talk about canes as the white cane famine. There's a white cane famine. Think about that. We think about food famine. There's a shortage of canes. They call it the white cane famine. And not only is what we're doing supplying canes, putting canes in the hands of people, but the African Union of the Blind's President Lucas, he told us, he said that you are actually saving lives, because he says daily I get reports throughout Africa of people who can't afford canes, because canes are about $150 US over there, which is a month's worth of rent or food for a family. And these folks have never owned canes, many of them, and they try to be independent. They try to cross streets. They try to travel on very tough, rough terrain, and they get hurt. They get hit by vehicles and are killed. He said, so you're actually saving lives. And so your donations, and I really want to just applaud our organization, not only the affiliate, but all the chapters and divisions and affiliates around the country. Our schools like the Colorado Center, Louisiana Center have donated so many canes. As of this point, in 3 years that we've been going strong, we have sent over 660 canes to 16 countries around the world, including those Bibles we talked about, clothes, shoes, slates and stylus, toothbrushes, and even cell phones. So we appreciate y'all's support. Just because we're in a pandemic doesn't mean that we are secluded or isolated. This is still a great way that we as individuals and chapters and organizations can continue to give back and support our brothers and sisters around the world. So I just really want to express my gratitude and thanks to all of you guys.
Thank you, Jimmy. Melissa, get ready. In recognition of Custom Canes, they gave us 2 gift certificates. First is a $35 value, 3 charms of your choice. And Melissa, who do we have?
We have got, let me see here, Sherry Thorson.
Sherry, are you here?
I'm here.
Good deal. Next, we've got a $150 gift certificate from Custom Canes. Who do we have?
Sharon Warren Gatabo.
Sharon, are you here? Okay, who's next?
Magaline Mathis.
Come on, Melissa. You know I'm your favorite national representative ever.
I'm
Come
trying,
on now.
Kevin.
Come on, baby. Come on, bring it home to Colorado.
She's not here.
Okay, go ahead.
Next is Roxy Chamberlain.
I
Roxy,
bet she's here.
you're here.
She's going to be here.
Roxy,
Come on, Roxy.
*6.
Really? Maybe not.
I can't believe that one.
I
Okay.
hate it when I'm out of the room and they call your
Now,
name.
I know this person's on here.
Don't call my name.
Who is it?
Oh, man.
Who is it, Melissa?
Nobody. Okay, James Brown.
James Brown.
Oh.
Okay, guys.
Is he on here?
He needs
to- I'm here.
He's here.
Don't
I'm
hear.
here.
All right, guys.
James.
We brought it home 1 minute over schedule. How's that for running the train? So we will reconvene at 12:30. You don't want to miss it. You do not want to miss David Diniteris and hear his speech. You don't have to be brilliant to be resilient. David is a nationally known speaker, and we are indeed very fortunate to have him here today. So don't be late. Going to let you take a break, get you something to eat maybe, and we will see you in 30 minutes at 12:30. I get my time zones mixed up. 12:30 Central, 1:30. So what time is it? Yeah, 12:30 Central, 1:30 Eastern. We'll see you then. Thanks.
Good job, y'all. Woo-woo. Love Tennessee.